Howdy once again, and for the final time, and this is part 10 of a 10-part series that I have been working on for about a month already, making the float lock vise. And it's really finished except for the finishing work, meaning putting some bluing on it, painting it, breaking the corners, deburring, and final assembly. And hopefully you've watched the first 9 parts, and you have a lot of endurance if you did, because it took a long time. I think there will be a lot of people making this vise, and there are 2 different ways you can make it. One is to just follow the general verbal instructions and some dimensions that I gave you along the way. But Mr. Ken Stokely, out of the great state of Texas, made a set of blueprints, and they will be presented at the end of this video, and I hope they show up okay. And Ken has a company called Magic Design and Machining Services. So he was most gracious and spent a lot of time making these drawings. Very nicely done. And then he sent me hard copies here so that I would have good copies to produce and scan and all of that. Probably better than what I could get over a PDF file. I'm not really sure. I don't understand all that. So these will just be screenshots of this at the end. So hopefully this will be helpful to you. And I thank you again, Ken, so much for doing this and taking the time. And I'm sure you're a busy man. Again, I started to say there are 2 ways of doing this. One is to follow all my directions, and then the other, the blueprints. But you'll find that the blueprints vary a little bit in design from the way I did this. So you can use my way or Ken's way or a combination of the 2. Now Ken made his drawings off of a copy of this, not a copy, but a perfect example that he bought off of eBay, still in the box. So it's a pristine example that he has. And you know what, I saw that on eBay and I thought, I'm going to bid on that. Well, I came back a little later and it was gone. I think that Ken was the one that bought it. I'm not really sure on that, but I think it cost about $100 or so, which is still probably a good value for something like this that you can't buy anymore. They haven't probably made them for 50 years. But the point I wanted to make here is that this is an original corner clamp that came with the one that I bought at an auction. So I made mine, and you're not going to be able to make this exactly like this because these are all stampings that were mass produced. You know, this would be very complicated to fabricate the way AMF did it. Impossible, really. So mine was, of course, made from a steel. You're going to have a hard time finding a steel C-clamp to make it the way I did. So what Ken did in his drawing is to fabricate one out of 2 pieces, and you can see they're screwed together. Now I haven't totally gone through these drawings to correct them. They are done, I think, in good faith by Ken, and since he runs an engineering service, I'm sure that they are quite accurate. So let's get on with finishing this project, which has really been dragging out way too long. Thank you for staying with me. So this video will consist of me doing a little polishing, although it's not too bad a shape now. And you know, I'm not very original, so I'm copying this verbatim. It's copied verbatim from day 1 here. But I'm going to blue it, and I'm going to paint some of the surfaces as you see here. And I will start out off camera painting this yellow. I like that yellow. And this is what I'm using from Ace, but you know, it doesn't give the name of the paint on it. And there's so little in here, I hope I have enough left to do it. You can paint it any color you want. If you object to this, all of the ones that I had at the high school were painted yellow. And the examples that I had at the high school were really much better than this. That is, this is the home version that was affordable, whereas the ones at the high school had replaceable jaws, they had a rapid feature. They didn't use a screw like this. They had a different type of screw, and I think I already showed you pictures of that. But it was a far more expensive tool. And believe me, in a high school you needed replaceable jaws, and I used to buy them every couple of years or so and renew the projects, because the kids would drill through the jaws and the shafts and all the other parts, so they were rebuildable. Most of you will recall that I pinned this together temporarily with pins that I could pull out in a final assembly. You can get a wonderful finish by draw filing with a nice sharp file. And we used to do a lot of that at school. The kids absolutely hated it because the files, of course, were dull and I couldn't keep good files around, but that's a wonderful way to get a good finish. Another great way is to start with a clean, flat surface, probably cleaner than this, and simply do this with some high-quality paper. You don't really even need to do the inside surface like this, but I'm just showing you different ways, and you can start with coarse and work your way to as fine as your little heart desires. I have the luxury and good fortune to have this 6-inch belt sander, and that's a wonderful way to do it, other than I consider it sometimes a little bit too aggressive. So if you don't keep your work on there perfectly flat, you can lose your true surfaces that are already on the material. No one in the Western Hemisphere will have one of these, but I've been dying to use it, and to show it off for that matter, and see if it is worth its salt. But this is nothing more than a right-angle drive that came, well, I don't know what brand it is. It's got a nice chuck on it. It came in an auction box a long time ago, and I've got it held in this end in a Loris type holder. This will be held in the 3-jaw chuck of the claws inlay. That way I can vary the speed. And this 10-inch cast iron disc, I don't know where it came from, but I did put the other day a new disc on here. I don't know what grit it is. I think it's about a 120. So take a look at this. The stem is held in the Loris here to keep the whole thing from, of course, from revolving. Now, this in the 3-jaw chuck, I don't know, is this crazy? Well, one thing I like about this is about chest high on me, so I am working at a nice level. I don't have to stoop over, and I can see exactly what I'm doing. And I can run it at any speed I want to be aggressive or not too aggressive, but yet that, like I said, that's not too coarse of a disc on there. Let's try it out. Boy, that's cleaning up nicely. Now, this is what I did on the shaper, and it is rougher than a cob, but that's really what I wanted to do more than these other surfaces. I interrupt this sequence to say that I originally built this thing to sharpen knives because a grinder or other types of abrasive tools are too aggressive or get the tool too hot or cut too quickly, and I thought I would have more control this way. And it's almost at eye level. It's about 15 minutes later, and they're not perfect, but that's quite enough of that. And you can spend as much or a little time as you want on polishing. Alright, that was no fun, but I spent about 15 minutes polishing, and it's not perfect, and you can see a little bit of a circular thing going on there. A little scratch, but you know, that's just going to have to be good enough, because you know that I don't like finishing work. And that was a nick from the steel mill, or when I bought it. I'm not going to take that out. But anyway, these are ready for bluing. And I've already been fiddling around here a little bit with the Birchwood Casey Perma Blue That's from 3 years ago. Hope it's okay. Well, I did this piece already, and it looks pretty good. And it's been oiled. And I don't enjoy bluing either. You know, it's messy. And this piece, I'm not planning on polishing it anymore, and it's already got some blue on it from the bending operation. How that will look after bluing, I don't know, but I'm just going to blue it as is. Then I'm going to blue these two pieces, and then later on I'm going to paint this. And I just went down and bought some more paint. That yellow paint that I had was clogged up, but I'm going to paint the ends on this, and I'm going to paint this thing yellow, because I do remember that at least the ones at school were painted yellow. Maybe I'll blue this also. And most of that is off camera, because I've done bluing before in other videos, and countless other gunsmiths have done it. And I show that in the video where I make the little machinist clamps, I believe, toolmaker's clamps. So I'm really not going to show that in the interest of time. I'm making some progress, and this piece turned out just fine, as did this one, and they're oiled already. This one, the crank, I knew it would be a little funny in here, but it's passable. And then I did one of the main pieces, not satisfied at all, but this is the gnarly surface here, is the one that's going to be painted, so it doesn't really matter. But you know, I've always suffered with that spottiness, and it really needs another coat. But since I'm running about pretty low on this, you know, that's it. That looks pretty good, but that's the bottom side. I don't care about the inside. I think I had a little water or something that was streaking down there, but that'll have to do. Let me go ahead and do this one. That was a self-fulfilling prophecy. In my own mind, I predicted this wasn't going to turn out too great. And as usual, I end up with a mottled finish. Now, you don't need to give me advice how to do this, because I know it all goes back to cleanliness and surface preparation and all of that. So, but that's good enough for this job. I'm a machinist, not a gun blower. So that's it for today. I'm going to go out into the garage and do a little yellow painting, and then I'll paint this tomorrow. I have to remove the oil. That is going to be a little tricky, trying to paint just the one end. Well, I will mask it, but you know, how well will that turn out? Okay, I'll see you on the morrow. Well, it's the next day and the paint is dry. I'm ready to remove the masking and start assembling. Paint dried pretty nicely. The hole in the crank needs to be opened up to a number 29 drill so that the 1/8 inch roll pin will slide freely and give you a free movement right here rather than too tight of a movement. You might understand that later on as you assemble it. You see now that this moves freely. If you do not drill that oversize, it will be tight. But maybe you want it to be tight, doesn't matter. I'm using 1/8 inch roll pins for this, and some of them I have to cut off to length with the little cutoff wheel on the Dremel. Did you remember that I made tiny little witness marks here? There's one right there and one right here for ease of assembly, just in case there was some inaccuracies originally. I like to put a little oil on the pins as well. And then finish them off with a brass punch. Remember now that the devil is in the details. Some of you may have noticed that I have a large selection of hand tools and layout tools and so on, and it makes your job so much more pleasurable. Be sure and start accumulating tools. Well, there it is, fully assembled. It seems to operate just fine, look pretty good. Always could have done a little bit better job on my finishing work, the bluing, but after all, this is just a vise, as I have often said. You may or may not need a washer in there. Remember, those are 1/8 inch roll pins, and as I told you, it would have looked better with threaded rod that was not plated. To me that clashes, but maybe that's just me. Paint is optional. Take your time, do a good job on it, and you'll have a tool that you enjoy using on your drill press. And it should operate smoothly and freely without any binding. You know, I must have forgot all about leverage and a few things like that in my basic science or my early physics class, but remember to keep this hole much closer to the slot. As I did over here, remember I had to plug one hole. The first one was a failure, and I should remake that piece. Also, this piece could be shorter. It does not need to be that long, but the hole needs to be close to the hole. They had 6 shades of yellow at the hardware store, and it sure seemed like I selected the right one, but you can see it's not even close. Now, one other thing that you may consider doing is to put another Vise slot perpendicular to this one, and perhaps you can see it on the original parts drawing here. Note that this float lock vise is quite different from the one that I'm making or the ones that I had at school, and it does not use a guide rod. And in order to not use a guide rod, it becomes much more complicated, and this in fact is the nut, and it also acts as a keyway to keep the 2 jaws from doing this. Alright, let's give this guy a try. We got to mount the corner clamp. And there it is, the debut performance. Well, that concludes this 10-part video. Give it a try, make one. If you do, put it in the comments. I'd be interested in seeing if anyone is actually going to make one of these, and it'll be a handy addition to your shop. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Ken for making the drawings, which will be at the end of this video. So long for now.